Have you ever felt completely invisible in a room full of people who claim to know you? I remember the exact moment I realized how little I actually mattered. It was my 28th birthday party. I had organized everything myself, decorations, invitations, even the cake. But the moment I stepped into the room, I felt eyes roll at me. Have you ever thrown a party only to realize the person you trusted the most was quietly plotting against you? Yeah, that's what I felt when I noticed my so-called best friend whispering to my colleagues and smiling like she owned the room. She had brought a surprise drink for me. I didn't know at that moment, but it wasn't a surprise I would ever forget. If you've ever been underestimated, erased, or betrayed by someone you trusted, hit that like button. This story is for you. I raised my glass thinking we were celebrating. And then she laughed, soft, almost innocent, but I felt it. That vibration of betrayal. The drink she handed me, the words she whispered, they were calculated. And for a moment I froze. Drop your story in the comments if you've ever been gaslighted by someone you called a friend. You're not alone. And I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll see how quiet power can win over arrogance, lies, and manipulation, without a single explosive outburst. Let me introduce myself. My name is Raina, I'm 28, and I work as a financial analyst in a mid-sized tech firm in Chicago. I've always been a quiet, observant person. People underestimate me all the time, and honestly, I've learned to use that. I'm not loud. I'm not dramatic. I watch, I listen, and I note everything. It's a skill I developed after years of dealing with people who thought their words were invisible. People who tried to erase me, control me, or humiliate me. And this is the story of how I finally reclaimed myself from one of the most toxic people I've ever met. Someone who nearly destroyed my career, my social life, and my sense of self. Her name is Cassandra Blake. She's brilliant, charming, and terrifyingly manipulative. If I were to describe her in one word, it would be predatory. She's the type of person who smiles at your face while plotting to push you off the ladder of success. In our office, she was everyone's friendly mentor. Outside of work, she became my best friend. At first, I didn't see the claws beneath the silk gloves. She would compliment me, laugh at my jokes, make me feel seen. And then when no one else was watching, she would subtly undermine me. Started with small things. She would forget to tell me about important meetings. She would subtly correct my work in front of others, making it seem like I was incompetent. Once she accidentally sent an email criticizing my analysis to our entire department instead of just me. Everyone assumed it was my mistake. I had to spend hours fixing the fallout. At home, she would call me at odd hours, asking for favors I never agreed to. She would guilt me into attending social events I didn't want to go to, all while constantly reminding me how lucky I was to have her guidance. And the worst part? People loved her. They trusted her. She had this magnetic ability to twist reality. If I ever mentioned her manipulation, I would be seen as overreacting or worse, jealous. Big turning point. Everything came to a head at the office's annual gala. Cassandra had secretly been trying to take credit for a major project I led. She emailed the client pretending the project was her brainchild. She even manipulated our manager to publicly praise her during the event. I watched her sip champagne, glowing under the spotlight as everyone clapped for her. And I knew I had to act. But I also knew that confrontation in that moment would have backfired. She thrived on public chaos, on my emotional reactions. I couldn't give her that. So I stayed quiet. I smiled. I collected myself. And I started planning. I began my silent investigation. Every email she sent, every message she deleted, every casual comment in meetings, I noted it. I traced her steps back for months. I saved documents, screenshots, and backup files. I even noticed subtle discrepancies in her achievements that didn't add up. I spoke quietly to colleagues she had manipulated. Some of them admitted privately that she often took credit for others' work. I kept meticulous notes and connected the dots. I became a ghost. Invisible on the surface but underneath unstoppable. The reveal happened at the next board meeting. I presented the project, carefully documenting every step I had taken. I highlighted dates, emails, contributions from team members, and even evidence of Cassandra's attempts to rewrite history. As I spoke, I watched her smile falter. Her eyes darted nervously. For the first time, she wasn't in control. For the first time, her mask slipped. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply laid out the facts. The board members, initially skeptical, were now looking at her in disbelief. The aftermath was quiet but effective. Cassandra wasn't fired immediately, but her influence waned. People stopped trusting her. She was excluded from key meetings. Her reputation crumbled slowly as colleagues realized the truth. The power she had built through manipulation vanished, almost silently. And me? I wasn't vindictive in the dramatic sense. I had simply let the truth speak for itself, and that was enough. Today I'm in a new role leading my own team. I live in a small apartment I love, with a garden I tend to on weekends. My life is quieter, yes, but it's mine. I don't need revenge in the traditional sense. The quiet power I gained, my dignity, my confidence, my ability to stand tall without shouting, was more than any dramatic showdown could have given me. I sleep peacefully knowing I reclaimed my space, my voice, and my life. If you've ever been underestimated, erased, or betrayed, this story is for you. You don't always need fireworks to win. Sometimes silence, observation, and patience speak louder than anger. Share your story in the comments. I want to hear about the quiet power moves you've made, or hope to make. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice, redemption, and reclaiming yourself on your own terms. Because at the end of the day, the most satisfying victories are the ones you win without anyone realizing how clever you were until it's already too late. Even after the gala, Cassandra didn't back down. She continued her subtle attacks, smiles in the hallway, friendly emails, veiled compliments that were really critiques. But something had changed. I had a quiet fire inside me, one that didn't burn with anger but with clarity. I knew she was a master manipulator, but I also knew one thing. Manipulators always leave a trail. I started observing her everywhere. Not like a stalker, I mean quietly in everyday moments. In meetings, she would subtly take notes when I spoke, only to accidentally misquote me later. At lunch, she would casually mention things I supposedly said to her, twisting my words just enough to sow doubt. I realized this wasn't about one event or one project. This was a pattern, years of controlling, gaslighting, and erasing people around her. And I had been one of her favorite victims because I stayed quiet. I decided to go deeper. Not impulsively, not emotionally, calmly. I started compiling everything. Emails she had missent. Messages she had deleted. Documents she claimed as her own. Testimonies from colleagues she had subtly bullied. I even checked our shared project files on the server. Cassandra had a habit of renaming files, changing metadata, and claiming credit for work she hadn't done. Small things like a spreadsheet she altered, but combined they formed a clear pattern. I began keeping a private journal of her manipulations. Every whisper, every eye roll, every subtle sabotage went in there. I noted dates, times, locations, everything. And as I did this, something surprising happened. I stopped feeling like a victim. I started feeling powerful. Silent, observing, invisible, but ready. Cassandra's manipulations weren't just professional. She thrived socially. At office parties, she would charm everyone. She would forget to include me in group chats, gossip subtly about my personal life, and frame me as overly sensitive if I reacted. I watched her carefully, taking note of her patterns. One evening, she invited me to a supposed friendly dinner. She made a point of talking about my past mistakes in front of mutual friends, framing it as a joke. Everyone laughed, but I noticed the shift in the room. A few colleagues exchanged glances. They were starting to see the cracks I had already begun to notice. I didn't react. I simply smiled, nodded, and took mental notes. My silent investigation escalated. I spent nights going through emails and messages, piecing together a timeline. I discreetly spoke to colleagues who had been manipulated before me. One admitted, "I always thought it was me," until she did the same thing to someone else. I created a detailed spreadsheet mapping out her manipulations. I categorized professional sabotage, social manipulation, and gaslighting incidents. Each entry included dates, witnesses, and proof. I even discovered one critical moment: she had tried to frame me for an error in a major client report. Had it gone unnoticed, it would have damaged my career. But because I was thorough and methodical, I found evidence to clear myself and document her interference. It wasn't easy. I had to suppress the urge to confront her immediately, to explode in front of her or everyone else. That would have been the easy, dramatic path, but it wouldn't have worked. Instead, I became patient. Every interaction, every friendly smile from her, every subtle undermining, recorded mentally, analyzed later, and filed in my growing evidence archive. I realized something profound. Quiet power isn't about being seen. It's about controlling the narrative without anyone noticing. Cassandra thrived on chaos and drama. I thrived on calm observation and strategy. And that gave me an edge she couldn't anticipate. After months of careful documentation, I began to leverage small truths in strategic ways. I corrected her in meetings, but calmly with proof. I presented accurate reports with impeccable references, leaving no room for her to twist the story. I quietly spoke to key team members about the discrepancies I had noticed, framing it as seeking advice rather than accusing. The effect was subtle but powerful. People started noticing inconsistencies in her stories. Colleagues who had previously admired her now exchanged uncertain glances. And I kept my calm. Always. Cassandra's charm still worked on some people, but the cracks were appearing. And I could see her frustration building, like a storm she couldn't control. One day, during a department meeting, she tried to take credit for a project I had completed single-handedly. I calmly pulled up the emails, the timeline, and screenshots on the shared screen. No drama. No yelling. Just facts. The team watched silently as the evidence spoke for itself. Cassandra tried to explain, stumbled over details, and left the room visibly shaken. That was the first time I realized something incredible. I didn't need to fight fire with fire. Fire burns fast, but quiet strategy lasts. I began reflecting on everything Cassandra had taught me, unintentionally. I learned patience. I learned observation. I learned that calm intelligence can be more terrifying than rage. I wasn't the same Raina who had felt invisible at her birthday party. I was someone who had built an arsenal of evidence, strategy, and quiet power. And I knew the next step would be the reveal, the moment when all the pieces finally clicked in front of the right people. The final confrontation begins. It all came together during the quarterly board meeting. I walked into the room feeling calm, collected, and completely invisible to Cassandra. She didn't see me as a threat yet, but today that would change. She began her usual act. Smiling, presenting herself as the shining star of the department, subtly taking credit for achievements, and making jokes that belittled others. But this time I was ready. I waited for the perfect moment. Not for revenge, not for theatrics, but to let the truth speak. I started with a simple statement. Before we move on to the project updates, I'd like to clarify a few details regarding our recent accomplishments. Everyone paused. Cassandra's smile flickered. She could sense something was coming. Then I began presenting evidence. Emails with dates, screenshots of altered documents, and messages proving her attempts to take credit for work I had completed. Every piece was factual, calm, and undeniable. The room went silent. Board members exchanged looks, colleagues nodded quietly, and Cassandra's carefully constructed mask started to crack. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse with anger. I simply narrated the truth, step by step, letting the evidence speak louder than my words. I noticed the first signs immediately. Her hand trembling slightly as she held her notes, her eyes darting nervously to the documents I displayed, the forced smile fading into confusion. She tried to interject. That's not. I calmly responded. All the documents are time-stamped. You'll see exactly how this unfolded. Her usual charm and poise couldn't save her. Colleagues whispered to each other, looking at her with suspicion for the first time. It was mesmerizing to watch, not because I enjoyed her discomfort, but because I had waited patiently for years for this truth to emerge. After the meeting, the impact was undeniable. Cassandra's influence waned immediately. She was removed from high-profile projects. Colleagues started approaching me for leadership guidance instead. Her social charm, once her strongest weapon, lost its effect. People had seen the truth. And I remained quiet, humble, and composed. No celebrations, no dramatics. Just the knowledge that I had reclaimed my space, my work, and my dignity. Cassandra didn't die or go through dramatic humiliation, but her slow fall was just as satisfying. She lost trust, influence, and credibility. Invitations she once received stopped arriving. Promotions bypassed her. Her carefully constructed social web unraveled quietly. Sometimes revenge isn't about explosions or confrontations. It's about consistency, intelligence, and patience. Watching someone lose power without you lifting a finger feels more rewarding than any public spectacle. After everything settled, I took time for myself. I moved into a new apartment, quiet, bright, filled with my favorite books and plants. I cultivated hobbies I had ignored for years: painting, morning runs, and journaling. I nurtured friendships with people who truly valued honesty and integrity. For the first time in years, I felt free. Not just free from Cassandra, but free from self-doubt, fear, and the need to constantly defend myself. The quiet power I had cultivated, the patience, observation, and strategic thinking was now fully mine. Looking back, I realized that the people who try to erase you don't realize how dangerous quiet intelligence can be. They think silence means weakness. They think patience is ignorance. But patience, observation, and strategy are stronger than anger. They're unstoppable when combined with truth. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to humiliate her. I just needed to wait, prepare, and act wisely. And that was enough. If you've ever been underestimated, erased, or betrayed, this story is for you. Remember, quiet power isn't loud. It isn't chaotic. It's strategy, observation, patience, and the courage to act when the time is right. Share your own stories in the comments, your moves of silent power, the times you observed and waited, and the moments you finally reclaimed your dignity. Hit that like button if you've ever been underestimated. Subscribe for more stories of justice, revenge, and quiet power. Because the most satisfying victories are the ones you win without anyone realizing how clever you were. Until it's already too late.